This is like the beach movie juvenile teenage part. Like this is, I guess, like kids could identify with this or something. I wanted to have a man and a woman. I didn't want a little girl. Stuff from when I was young was better than the stuff that's now. And I will give you the example.
I do think that the casting of Christopher Walken was a bit off-putting for me with the Emperor. I was expecting someone much more regal.
These worms are bad. You gotta kill them. I'm coming back and make sure they're dead.
Hi, welcome to The Real Generation Gap. I'm BJ Kang.
I'm Fred Satilli.
And the movie we're reviewing today is Dune Part 2, War, Wacky Space Religions, and Giant Worms, the continuation of Paul Atreides' quest for revenge and the war for Arrakis. So, what'd you think of this movie, Fred?
It was a great movie. It was a great epic. It was better than I thought it would be. A couple of miscast people. The first guy I thought was miscast was Paul Atreides, the hero of the movies, because he's the Messiah. He's leading the free men, the Fremen, be able to control their own world and take it out of the hands of these essentially mafia families. He just was too much of a kid for a man my age. He didn't look like he could possibly be a leader. I thought I could kick his ass. Somebody with his physical stature wouldn't be able to fight that way.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? He wasn't The Rock. He just looked like a regular skinny kid to me.
Yeah, I wasn't sure about the casting of Timothée Chalamet for the role of Paul Atreides either. But I think in Dune Part 2, I think he earns it. Not maybe physical stature is something to be definitely taken into consideration when you're a hero, a leader,
right.
A strong warrior. But it's the charisma, the drive, the determination, the passion, the zeal. You know, all that is really shown through in Timothée Chalamet's performance, I would say. I mean, that one scene, and spoiler warnings for the whole movie, just to let everyone know. That one scene where he goes to the south to speak with the war council, and he
right.
just completely takes control.
Yes.
He's proven himself not just a warrior in physical capability, but with his words alone.
He was kind of sketchy. You know, he was in love with a little teenage girl or something. You know, she was kind of shaky. And then all of a sudden, you're right, he emerged, and he became aware of his power. He became very strong, and he started to dictate what was happening. Look, you people, I'm in charge now. This is the way it's going to go. And everybody went like, whoa. But see, I don't think everybody would go, whoa.
Yeah.
I think some gladiator knight guy would just lance him and, you know, be like, okay, here we're done with him. We're going to have a war. But he did do a terrific job of transforming. And also, like, there were other powerful forces, you know, like the Bene Gesserit, right? The nuns who had their own crazy religion and their own way of manipulating everything. I loved it that there was that one woman who sort of was in control of everything.
Yeah, like
you know,
lead priestess or something like that.
Yes, the lead priestess was like, this is how it's going to go. I've already seen the vision. Don't worry about these setbacks. And we see this in Washington, D.C. We know that the people you see on TV are not the people controlling what's going on, right?
Yeah.
So here you had two giant worlds. Arrakis is desert planet, but these people came from Caladan, ocean planet, right? And they traveled through space to get there. When they traveled through space with incredible technology, I mean, their digging machines were, you know, the size of a whole town practically. They were dealing with prehistoric people. And our reference would be Arabs living in the desert. You know, they had Arab garb.
I thought that was a really spectacular piece of the movie that really captivated me into this world, that really immersed me into it, which was like the costume design, specifically with the Fremen, because obviously the Fremen are 100% based off of like Middle Eastern culture. There's a lot of very much Islamic or even sort of like
pretty cool armor,
yeah.
right? But how did the desert people have plastic glasses? Like they don't have, you know what I mean? They don't have the industrial base to create that armor.
I think that's done, like that's one aspect that really reinforces that is the costume design, because they're wearing all these Middle Eastern garbs, you know, lots of head wrappings, head coverings, body covers and stuff like that.
Oh, yeah.
You know, sort of scarves and stuff like that. And it really drives forward the fact that even though this is the future, the costume design really helps to reinforce.
You don't know if it's the future.
Yeah.
That was the genius of Frank Herbert's book. It was in a place that was hundreds of light years away. It could have been millions of years ago or millions of years in the future, because they had their own religions and their own money and their own clothes and their own everything. There was nothing Earth-like about it. These are not humans. They're aliens. Everybody in the movie is an alien. There are no people.
I thought still that like that was really masterful for it to seem like futuristic tech, and yet still reinforce through their clothing as one big part that this is a traditional, not as industrialized, but religious and very culturally rich society, in contrast to, say, like the Harkonnens, who they were always dressed in this like sleek black armor that looked very edgy and was very covered in like plastic, I would say. Yeah.
Every country, no matter where you go, everybody's draped in clothing. You know, even in India, where they don't even have real clothes, they just wrap fabric around their body. For sudden, they make these big ball of fabric, and they're in there somewhere. I always felt that strange in 2024 that there are people that dress that way. Why wouldn't you just put on pants and a t-shirt? You know?
Well, it's the same thing. It's exactly like how it is with the Fremen. It's like, it's about tradition. It's about culture. It's about, you know, like they're just not as industrialized. Not so much they're not as advanced, but they're just not as industrialized because their focus is not industry. It's culture and family and stuff like that.
That's interesting also. Where do you want your society to go?
Yeah.
Do you want your society to be religious like in the Dark Ages? Or do you want them to be like in the Renaissance and, you know, all built out in armor and everything?
Yeah.
So, yeah, those elements are all there. Frank Herbert was he made a fantastic thing. And this is another generation gap thing that I keep bringing up. This is something from my generation that they're making now. Now, I know they make new things. I liked 24. I liked Game of Thrones. You know, I like the whole, you know, I watch Reacher. But boy, they sure do take a lot from when I was young. And stuff from when I was young was better than the stuff that's now. And I will give you the example. We talked about Star Wars. And what was your statement about that?
So to give my sort of general impression of this whole movie, I felt that this movie was like Star Wars: A New Hope meets Lord of the Rings: Return of the King. It introduces you to this new world, or the first movie introduces you. This movie, part 2, immerses you into this world. It grips you. It captivates you. You're 100% there on Arrakis with Paul Atreides, with the Fremen, and then it builds up to this huge grand scale climax at the end that I felt was reminiscent to the final battle at Return of the Kings and Lord of the Rings, which must have been extremely
exciting. I like the Battle
exciting.
of Helm's Deep myself. But I'll tell you what, Star Wars was a movie for little kids. They had little beep-boop guy, and they had the Wolfman guy, right? And they had the Black Knight, you know, I'm your father. You know, I'm your father. I was never more disappointed in my life than I went to the first episode of Star Wars. I thought it was going to be a tremendous thing. And it was a tremendous commercial success, but it was nothing like this. Mm-hmm. You know, this was more like The Man Who Would Be King.
Mm-hmm. I really appreciated that about Dune Part 2 in contrast to Dune Part 1. Dune Part 1 was a really good introduction to the world, but I felt like it was a little weak standing on its own because it's a setup for a franchise. It's the setup for the next movie. I felt like if it was stronger on its own as its own thing, it would have been a much... I thought Dune Part 1 could have been better, but Dune Part 2 really knocked it out of the park by being so strong by itself. Because Denis Villeneuve, who was the director for, you know, Blade Runner 2049, he really just went all in with this movie. He really unleashed the gates, and Dune 2 is just so strong on its own, and it's such a spectacle to see on its own, in my opinion.
It was a strong spectacle. It was a Herculean epic movie.
Yeah.
Another person who I thought was miscast in the movie was these two warring families are governed by an emperor. And the guy they picked to be the emperor was Christopher Walken.
Yeah.
And I love Christopher Walken. I mean, he's an institution. But when he hit the screen, I just couldn't help thinking he was going to go, you know, if you don't kill these worms, you're going to need more cowbell.
I knew.
You know, these worms are bad. You got to kill them. I'm coming back and make sure they're dead.
Forget the spice. We need more cowbell.
Right. You're going to hate yourself if you don't do more spice mining. And then, you know, Will Ferrell would come in, you know. It was terrible to cast him for that. When you have somebody that strong an individual, these people really needed to be foreigners. Yeah. I needed to not recognize anybody. And when JL told me that Faiz Rutha, that he was Elvis Presley in another movie because of all the bad characters that they did, that guy was an amazing piece of casting. He was pure evil. Yeah. He really was. He was really ruthless. Look at that. What is that? That's a ghoul. That's not a human. he looks like an alien.
Yeah.
He was spectacular as an evil character, and that casting was amazing, and the makeup work on him. And like you said, you love the outfits. And we just saw The Man Who Would Be King. It was the same. Vast armies of people that were dressed. And this is vast armies of people that were dressed, right?
Yeah.
They really do a spectacular job. These between editing, makeup, and clothing, it's like part of movies that it's so underappreciated.
Another part of the movie that I thought was very immersing was the sound. The sound was spectacular. I love like the subtle nuances and everything. One of our camera guys, Rudy, pointed it out where he said he loved that final fight scene at the end because there's very little cuts and it's so heavy on the sounds. It sounded very punchy the way he said it. You know, you could really feel the impact of everything they're doing, the weight and the heft of every swing that they have.
Right.
Not to mention, like, you know, the subtle, like, running of footsteps across sand when the Fremen would roll out of the dirt and stuff like that. All those sounds were great.
It was remarkable.
It was, like I said, very captivating as well. Some parts the soundtrack was very ethereal, very mystic. Sometimes it was very haunting, very, overwhelming. Other times it was very epic, very orchestral. Like, especially during that final battle scene, it was just, pedal to the metal.
Yeah, more like pedal to the sand.
Yeah.
Go back to the scene that you just showed, if you would. Here's what BJ is talking about. Look at the costumes over here. Yeah. Look at the costumes in the middle. Over here is the Bene Gesserit, right? These are the weird nuns. There's his mother down with the chains across her face. Look at that scene. Look at the way these guys are dressed. It's really remarkable. Mm-hmm. It's just that scene alone, just that picture, the people with the covered faces, they were like how the immortals were. Right, the ones that attacked the Spartans at Thermopylae.
Yeah, they
had those masks on. They were just totally anonymous. And then here's these really, really peasant people, and here's these people decked out in all kinds of armor. Fantastic.
Someone who did a flawless job was Javier Bardem, Stilgar, the Fremen who sort of helps to train Paul Atreides. Fantastic job. Like, I was completely believed his character. That is a zealous fanatic, very deeply religious person who's 100% totally bought into this prophecy, and he will stop at nothing to make sure that's fulfilled. He will stop at nothing to make sure that he is there right by Paul Atreides' side.
To remind everybody to keep the faith.
Yeah.
Right? You realize who this guy is. Don't make the golden calf. Believe in God. Don't make the golden calf. No other idols. Yeah. This is the one avenue. This is the way. Yeah, you're right. I'm glad you mentioned that. They moved the crowd, and he really was spectacular.
This movie, Dune Part 2, is much more about meeting and getting to know who the Fremen are. And there are so many aspects which really help you to be absorbed into the world. There, the costume design, the acting by all the Fremen themselves, as well as the set design.
Well, they're underground. They're underground tabernacles where they had the pools of water.
Tabernacle is a great way to put it, because you very much, it's interesting how much they're supposed to be otherworldly and yet they feel so familiar. Like, you can very clearly see the connections with Middle Eastern religions, Fertile Crescent, mythology and stuff like that.
That's true. But once again, much as I didn't buy the Paul Atreides character, his girlfriend was not a leading woman. Like, this is like the beach movie juvenile teenage part. Like, this is, I guess, like kids could identify with this or something. I wanted to have a man and a woman. I didn't want a little girl. And she did a good job of doing her part, but she was trying to take care of her people, but she was just such a girlfriend, And I think when you're having a planetary scale war, you just needed somebody a little bit more mature with some more mileage. Or a part of his motivation for the stuff he did was to be with her and be by her side.
Yeah.
And where I could see those two as a couple, I thought that they were both just a little bit too young and immature. Mm-hmm. I needed a woman that was like 35. I needed a man that was like 35 to be this. Because when they're just young kids, for an adult, it's hard to identify with that. Mm-hmm. I didn't want them to be a geezer. I didn't expect them to be my age. They just, they looked like, they were sophomores in college. I'm not saying their acting wasn't good. I'm just saying that they were just too young for the part.
I do think that there were some questionable decisions made with the characters. I do think that the casting of Christopher Walken was a bit off-putting for me with the Emperor. I was expecting someone much more regal, I think is the best way to say it. And then not only that, but Florence Pugh's character, the princess, was very just, I guess not even there, like 5 minutes. I felt like 5 minutes of screen time. I know realistically it was more, but there was like, I think that was one of the parts that I said was weak about, like, I felt about Dune 1, was that it felt very franchisey from the beginning, right? It's hard for it to feel strong as a standalone movie when you don't try to make it strong on its own. And using Florence Pugh in the way that they did, I understand that they're trying to set up for the next movie, but like you just make that character, and essentially characters are a part of the movie, so you're making a part of the movie just a tiny bit weaker that way.
Yeah, I felt the same way. Unimportant part. Could have been written completely out.
Yeah.
Could have cut 5 minutes out of the too long movie.
For me, this is why I said it felt sort of like Star Wars: A New Hope meets Lord of the Rings. It's a perfect, to me, I was completely encapsulated. I was completely enamored from beginning to finish. 2 hours and 46 minutes goes by super fast with Dune Part 2. There was never a slow moment. I felt completely immersed in this world. A lot of weight to every scene. There's a lot of intention and purpose with every scene. And I think Denis Villeneuve, his style really shows through in this movie. Like, there's that one scene where the dropship with the Harkonnens land in this like sort of dust cloud after they just shot up like their home, and it's just like it's all orange and it's just all dusty, and they're going through very slowly, and it's a slow build up. It's beautiful cinematography work, and then all of a sudden a Fremen jumps out of the sands. You hear running of the sand, like a footsteps on sand. You hear a blade penetrate someone's armor, and the next thing you know, the footsteps fade away and they fade away into the dust cloud. I was breathtaking in that scene, and that's technically kind of a slow scene too in and of itself, but there's so much drama, there's so much climax in that.
But I'm glad you mentioned that scene, because this is a great movie. And is there anything keeping you from giving it a 10?
I think Dune Part 2 definitely breaks much more away from, I think, what Dune 1 suffered from, which was, it feels much more like an installment of a franchise and a very strong, good standalone movie. But Dune 2 still suffers it a bit. Like, it ends off on that scene with Chani all by herself.
Yeah. That's what I mean about the teenage girl
and then
thing.
And then a couple moments where you're taken out, like sort of Florence Pugh just kind of being there, the casting of Christopher Walken a bit. It was for those moments I felt a little taken out of this whole experience.
Right.
2 hours and 46 minutes, I want to be in this from beginning to end. And I was taken out at a couple moments, and that's the only thing that really would hold me back from giving it a 10. But I would still rate it very high, as we'll see at the end of this video.
That is exactly what I'm talking about. This guy wins the war, but loses the girl.
Yeah. I think another scene I want to point out really quick that stood out to me was right after he drinks the water of life, and he sort of like, and okay, big spoiler moment coming here. Big spoiler moment.
Yeah,
I just need to give everyone a warning real quick, where he's having the talk with his mother, and he finds out he's one of the Harkonnens.
Right.
He is the grandson of the Baron. And I thought what was interesting in that scene was that the lighting is done in a sort of way where it sort of pales him out. Like, he looks slightly paler in that scene, and it's not like his skin has changed, it's the lighting. And I think that was super intentional given the context of what they were talking about. And I thought, like, wow, that is just some very visual, like very subtle storytelling right there. Very small little piece add on that makes it, adds way more to the scene.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow, that's a good observation. I'd have to see that again to appreciate that.
Call me a bit of a sort of a common or simpleton, but I loved Avengers Endgame. I was just super totally over the top, and I love that over the top final battle scene where all the warriors run into each other with the swords and the giant sandworms and the atomic warheads that they had,
right,
which I thought was kind of funny.
But I like the little battle scenes. I like when the harvesting vehicles were landed, and then everybody attacked the harvesting vehicles, and they had to blow the tracks off the tanks, and that was really cool, because it was guerrilla fighting, and rather than those big epic Roman battle scenes like that, I like guerrilla fighting.
I think something that was really cool was I noticed at the beginning of the movie, it starts off with the Harkonnens burning all the Atreides bodies. They have in a big pile, and it's nighttime, and they're burning with bodies. It starts off like that. Then at the very end, at the end of the battle, right before the fight scene between Paul and the Baron's nephew, I can't remember his name, it has the Fremen burning all of the Harkonnens' bodies in the exact same way that it started.
And the Fremen would never burn those bodies. They would have drained them.
They probably did drain them, like right before they burned them.
No, it was a big issue for me. It was like, what are you doing? All that water, you know?
I just thought it was really cool, though, that parallel. It starts off with all the Harkonnens burning the Atreides bodies, and then you have the exact same scene, just with it reversed. And I thought that's very cool to have that sort of beginning and end, you know? That sort of, it comes kind of full circle. But
well, you have two basically crime families. These are people from off-world coming to this world to rape this world of its natural resources. So they're both equally ruthless. They're both equally criminal. They're there to extract this drug. It's a drug movie, and the indigenous people are superfluous to them. That's what's really going on here. And then in the end, they divulge that there are other worlds who are dependent on this drug traffic.
Yeah.
And they're like, we don't care what you two families do fighting it out amongst yourself. We're not letting this drug source go. So whatever you do, we're orbiting. We're waiting. In other words, somebody else is going to come in and fill that power vacuum, right?
Yeah.
Nobody's a hero here. These both families, there's not the good family and the bad family. They're both bad families. The good family is the Fremen, the Fremen, right? They're the people that they just want to be left alone on their planet. Basically, Avatar, right? People are coming there. They're gonna burn down the royal tree. It was the indigenous people are being exploited.
I thought that was something that that was like very
It was like Avatar meets Game of Thrones. You know,
that part was sort of interesting to me because it felt very like you have these desert people who are not as industrialized, but they have technology that is opposable to this big imperial technologically advanced force that is coming to oppress them and stuff like that. They're using guerrilla tactics to fight them. And I was like, this is like very Middle East war. This is very, the war on terror kind of thing going on. And I did relate it to Avatar, where it's like when Avatar was all about like the Native American sort of like narrative there, and this one was very much more of sort of like the Middle Eastern sort of war on terror battle that went on in the deserts there.
Have you ever seen the movie Lawrence of Arabia?
No, I haven't.
It's the same thing. When you're attacking a hostile environment, the people who live in the environment, they're going to outlive you because they're used to living there.
Yeah.
So the Atreides and the Harkonnen come to Desert Planet, and they're from Caladan, they're from Ocean Planet, and they have to take on these people in their environment. It's the same thing in jungle fighting. Regular American soldiers to fight in the jungle where indigenous people have immunity to the diseases and are used to drinking the water and all that kind of stuff. So these Fremen were in their environment. They weren't really hurting for anything. These other people could run out of supplies. They could be shut down. But to shut down the Fremen, you had to kill every last one of them.
Yeah, they had sand power, desert power.
Right, the way of the desert.
Yeah, I thought that was really impressive. Like it's a fictionalized society, and yet they feel very human. They feel super believable. The sincerity done with writing them as well as portraying them, costume, acting, sound design, even set design and stuff like that, all centered around them, is what kept me gripped for the entire movie. I was 100% in belief the Fremen are out there and they really do have all these customs. They act this way, they dress this way. 2 hours and 46 minutes, I was gripped by storytelling just like that.
What was their coolest weapon ever? They were able to weaponize the giant worms.
Yeah.
And these giant worms could literally, eat a whole mall. Like the mall you're watching the movie, and that thing was big enough to suck that whole thing into the sand, and it would be gone.
Yeah.
Loved the movie. Thought it was an epic.
Yeah.
Once again, something everybody should certainly see if you like science fiction.
I think even if you don't like science fiction movies, I think you should see this. I think you'll find yourself getting lost in this world much further than you think you will. You will literally be, like lost in the desert if you were to go watch this movie. So I think I'm ready to give a rating. Are you?
Yeah.
Okay. I would give this movie a 9 out of 10. I don't think it's perfect, but I think it's damn near close. I think it's really great. I was gripped all the way through. Everything is perfect except for just a couple parts, and so 9 out of 10. Please go see it.
And for me, it's a 9 also because of bad casting. And that's my only gripe with the movie. Otherwise, wow.
Thank you for watching The Real Generation Gap. Make sure to subscribe and leave a comment down below. Did you think that there was any casting errors in this movie? Thank you for watching.